When Newt Gingrich ran for president in 2016, his campaign was bankrolled by one enormous donor whose single-minded goal was for the U.S. to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. When Newt dropped out, he transferred his wealthy donor to Trump, along with the dearly bought promise. On December 6, 2017, Trump did as he was bought to do, recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and said the U.S. Embassy would be moved there.
After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
That announcement brought the predictable protests across the Middle East.
Now to the intensifying clashes in the Middle East. Flashes of violence between Palestinian protesters and Israeli troops following President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman is there tonight with the latest.
Tear gas and rubber bullets raining down, this time near the place where Jesus is believed to have been born.
Smaller clashes have continued, like here in Bethlehem. Palestinian authorities are trying to ensure that violence doesn't escalate further.
The city, often packed with holiday tourists, empty. The State Department warning Americans to stay off the streets across the region following President Trump's Wednesday announcement naming Jerusalem Israel's capital and vowing to move the U.S. Embassy there. 4 Palestinians dead and hundreds injured since that speech, health officials declaring a state of emergency. In East Jerusalem, which Palestinians hope to make their capital, scuffles broke out. And in Gaza, where fury at the president burned, Israeli airstrikes hit weapon sites after 3 rockets were fired into his territory.
Tonight, 2 Palestinian officials say leader Mahmoud Abbas will not meet Vice President Pence when he visits here later this month.
The decision was rebuked by a long list of former ambassadors to Israel who served under Republican and Democrat administrations, and resulted in an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council where Trump's decision was denounced by our friends and foes alike. The UN ambassadors from Britain, France, Italy, Sweden, and Germany issued a joint statement following the emergency meeting, saying that the U.S. decision was, quote, not in line with Security Council resolutions and was unhelpful in terms of the prospects for peace in the region, close quotes. Jerusalem was captured by Israel in the 1967 war, and the UN considers it an international city whose future is to be determined by negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. The Moron defends his decision by saying it recognizes, quote, reality, close quotes. Will he next recognize Russia's military conquest of Crimea as another, quote, reality? Or will that await an equally enormous campaign contribution from a Russian supporter? And what do knowledgeable people say about this uniformly condemned decision by our insulter-in-chief?
Moron!
Adding to the U.S. isolation on this international stage, on December 19, 2017, 14 of the 15 members of the United Nations Security Council voted in favor of a resolution drafted by Egypt that expressed, quote, deep regret, close quotes, over the U.S. decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The U.S. had to use its veto to keep the resolution from moving forward. And for that, we are supposed to be impressed with the deal-making powers of a man who knows something about self-promotion, but apparently nothing about international affairs. On December 20, 2017, Turkey and Yemen announced that they would ask the entire General Assembly to vote on a resolution that mirrors the one the U.S. vetoed before the Security Council on December 19. Our ambassador to the UN then issued a threat to all members of the United Nations, saying the U.S. would be, quote, taking names, close quotes, Trump made the same threat that evening. What will these so-called diplomats do with those names after Trump has made his American First policy well known throughout the U.S. and the world? Are they taking names for those countries that will be put on the American Second or America Third lists? The United Nations General Assembly would not be bullied or threatened by Trump or his minions and voted 128 to 9 in favor of the resolution. There were 35 abstentions and 21 absent. Trump, in less than a year in office, has isolated the U.S. in ways that were unimaginable before 2017. And what do we say to Trump about this turn of events? Moron! Vice President Pence had scheduled a December trip to Israel with the stated purpose of meeting Christian leaders and bringing focus to the sad plight of Christians living in the Middle East. But the decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel offended many of these Christian leaders who canceled their meetings with the Vice President in response to the U.S. decision. The Vice President's trip was postponed indefinitely. This writer traveled through Israel in early 2000 by bicycle and stopped in Nazareth for lunch. It was Friday, so the followers of Islam were having their customary Friday noon service, but this time it was on an open plaza. The reason? They wanted to build a mosque on this plaza. The Catholic Church was opposed, believing the mosque to be built would be so large that it would block the view of the Basilica of the Annunciation, seen in the background of the photo. This basilica is a popular stop for Christians visiting Israel. After returning home from a wonderful bike trip, the government of Israel gave approval to build the mosque, prompting protests from the Christian community in general and the Catholic Church in particular. After appeals from the Vatican, the government of Israel reversed its decision and said the mosque could not be built on that site. But construction had already begun, and the Muslim leaders said they would not stop construction. If a guy from Indianapolis knows the political dynamite surrounding the simplest of decisions in Israel, you would think a man who claims to be so smart he does not need a State Department would know the consequences of a major decision like the status of Jerusalem. But the moron did not. So much for knowing the facts on the ground in Israel when the Trump administration went against 50 years of uniform international policy on the status of Jerusalem. And what do intelligent people think of Trump's decision that isolates the U.S. in the United Nations and on the world stage? Moron!